Welcome to this explainer. When we picture the grand Roman war machine, our minds almost immediately go to sweeping campaigns, massive siege engines, and thousands of legionaries marching in perfectly synchronized formations. We tend to think of the grand strategy that conquered the known world. But today, we're going to zoom all the way down from those massive logistical triumphs to the very waist of the individual soldier. We're looking at Rome's most overlooked yet absolutely vital tool, the Pugio, the weapon of the last few inches. I want you to picture the sheer, absolute chaos of ancient close-quarters warfare. When the formation breaks, and it does break, what actually saves the legionary? The idealized textbook image of a Roman battle is this impenetrable wall of shields and a methodical, relentless advance. But the grim reality? Battle is never perfectly controlled. Men slip in the mud, shields shatter under heavy blows, formations abruptly open up, and primary weapons are knocked right out of exhausted hands. In those terrifying, unpredictable moments, when the enemy is literally breathing in your face, what keeps that individual Roman soldier alive? Okay, let's dive into Section 1, the weapon of last resort, Rome's insurance policy. The Roman military didn't just conquer the world through brute strength. They succeeded because they were, quite frankly, absolutely obsessed with redundancy. They loved their backup plans, their fortified camps, constant drilling, and reserve lines ready to deploy at a moment's notice. And that exact same philosophy of redundancy was scaled all the way down to the individual soldier's belt. On one side of that belt, you've got the gladius. This is the primary, incredibly famous sword of Roman conquest. It gets all the glory in the history books, for sure. But on the other side, we have the Pugio, the compact, personal insurance policy. While they belong to the exact same rigorous military world of strict discipline and heavy gear, they had very, very different jobs. The Pugio didn't replace the sword any more than the sword replaced the shield. The gladius was for the main fight. The Pugio was for the moments when everything else went terribly, terribly wrong. Moving on to Section 2, Anatomy of the Pugio. Engineered for close contact. The physical design of this dagger is just a perfect reflection of Roman pragmatism. We've got finds across Spain, Germany, Britain, and the Danube showing that this weapon drew heavy influence from Iberian traditions. You see, the Roman army wasn't frozen in its ways, far from it. When they encountered local short blades in Spain, they brilliantly borrowed, adapted, and standardized those foreign weapons until they became unmistakably Roman. And the sheer mechanical engineering of the blade itself is brilliant. It features a broad double-edged blade with a distinct wasted or leaf-shaped profile, so it narrows near the grip and widens before tapering to a sharp point. Combine that with a really strong central midrib and a protective sheath, and you realize these features weren't just for show. They were mechanically engineered to reinforce the blade, making it absolutely devastating for thrusting and stabbing into tight gaps, folds of armor, or exposed flesh when there was literally no room to swing. And we are talking about some serious pieces of hardware here. Think iron and steel blades with tangs fixed securely into grips of wood or bone. It's absolutely crucial to understand that these were designed strictly as lethal, purpose-built military weapons. They were not just your plain, casual field knives or basic utility tools. Every single inch of their construction was meant to survive the brutal, high-impact stress of frontline combat. Section 3. Identity on the belt. The mark of a soldier. So we've talked about the weapon's deadly physical form, right? But its profound social function in the daily life of a legionary is just as fascinating. In the Roman army, equipment was never just equipment. It was a language. Take the cingulum military. This wasn't just some decorated military belt, and it did a whole lot more than just hold up a scabbard. This belt and the Pugio hanging from it visibly marked the wearer as an active, privileged part of Rome's armed machine. Wearing this specific gear visually separated the highly disciplined Roman soldier from just another anonymous civilian laborer carrying a spear. It was a very public system of military authority that you wore right on your waist. The sheaths were crafted from iron, bronze, silvering, and tinning, often featuring these incredibly elaborate enamel and punched geometric patterns. Now you might be wondering, why on earth would a backup weapon be so insanely decorated? Well, in an army deeply obsessed with order, appearance, and public display, the sheath turned practical utility into a highly visible, flashy display of rank and status. It meant a dagger worn at the belts could be admired by your comrades, judged by your officers, and heavily respected by civilians. Let's move to Section 4, Combats in the Crush, when the gladius fails. Let's plunge right into the claustrophobic reality of the front line and see how this builds into a total failure cascade. The Pugio wasn't exactly ideal against a spearman or cavalry if you had wide open space. It only became truly necessary when all that space completely vanished. Step 1. The shields press together in a massive, suffocating crush. Soldiers are struggling for literal inches. Step 2. The formations violently open up, or a soldier's longer sword gets jammed, broken, or dropped in the mud. Step 3. In that desperate grapple, they draw the Pugio. In a tight space where you simply cannot swing a sword, a compact blade that can be quickly drawn from the belt means the absolute difference between life and death. But of course, the life of a legionary wasn't always a pitched, bloody battle. Between the blood and the mud, the Pugio served as a constant, practical companion. It was a vital tool for the mundane realities of camp life. We're talking going on night guard duty, cutting cord, handling rations, and managing daily camp tasks when there wasn't an enemy anywhere in sight. It was a core piece of military kit they lived with, maintained, and relied upon every single day. Which brings us to Section 5, the political shadow, instruments of elite betrayal. This story of the Roman dagger definitely carries a darker legacy of political violence. Tracking its history, we see those Iberian influences shaping the standard legionary kit back in the 1st century BC. But by 44 BC, this weapon of the frontiers was terrifyingly turned against the very heart of the Roman state. A group of senators famously used daggers for the assassination of Julius Caesar. Just think about that for a second. The common soldier's sidearm became forever entangled with high-level conspiracy and sudden violence. By the 4th century AD, as military belts and fashions slowly evolved, the classic Pugio faded from the archaeological record. But its symbolic mark, that was left forever. There's a brilliant quote here. The exposed dagger could mean urgency, danger, oath, punishment, or rebellion, and it hits the nail right on the head. This physical piece of metal evolved into an incredibly powerful psychological symbol. To the writers and politicians of the era, the dagger represented the violent, razor-sharp edge that was always lurking just beneath the polished surface of Roman public life. Rome was an empire of laws, yes, but it was fundamentally built and held together by armed men. So what does this all mean? As we bring all these pieces together, we realize that while grand strategy explains the sweeping campaigns and brilliant engineering explains the sieges, the dagger reveals the individual legionary. It strips away the massive formations and connects us directly to a single human being facing the immediate, terrifying reality of war. It was small enough to sit quietly on a belt, but it carried the immense, heavy weight of Roman military identity. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought today. If the gladius conquered the empire, did the Pugio preserve the individual? It's a truly fascinating question. The gladius won all the glory, but it was the Pugio, compact, highly decorated, lethal, and unmistakably Roman, that gave the soldier his personal survival. It was the weapon of the last few inches. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope it completely changed how you look at the Roman legionary. Keep exploring.